It was past midnight when we arrived, too late for anyone to be moving in and too quiet for Tokyo. The building loomed between a convenience store's blue hum and the black outline of the train tracks. The air was thick with dust and something faintly metallic. Ami pressed her hand against the door of apartment 403 before unlocking it, her fingers trembling like she expected someone to press back from the other side. Inside, the air felt wrong. It was still, but not empty. The kind of silence that hums behind your teeth. The wallpaper peeled in long curls, the color of nicotine, and the tatami mats sank with a muffled sigh beneath our shoes. There were no traces of furniture, no odor of the previous tenant, only the faint scent of mildew and the faraway echo of dripping pipes. When I closed the door, the sound of the city vanished completely. I tried to laugh, said something about how old buildings have personality. Ami didn't respond. She was staring at the wall beside the window, a wide, pale expanse that seemed to ripple slightly in the dim light. For a second, I thought I heard something too, a whisper, or maybe the settling of wood. But then it came again, soft and deliberate, like the sound of a breath being held just behind the plaster. That was the moment I realized the silence wasn't silence at all. It was listening. The first sound came just after 1 in the morning. I thought it was the pipes at first, the gurgle and sigh of an old building's lungs, but it was too deliberate. It had rhythm. 3 short pulses, like knuckles rapping against hollow wood. Ami was already awake, sitting up in the dim light of her phone. She whispered, "It's in the walls." We pressed our ears against the plaster. There was movement, like fabric rustling or voices pressed through layers of insulation. When I whispered back, the sound stopped instantly, like it had been listening. Ami pulled away, trembling. I left the recorder on. We tried to sleep, but every time we began to drift, the sounds returned, softer now, like breathing. By morning, I convinced myself it was air trapped in the pipes. Yet part of me already knew. The apartment wasn't just making noise, it was remembering something. The next night, the sound moved. It was coming from above. Heavy dragging, like someone sliding furniture across the floor. I went upstairs, apartment 500. The door was locked, dusty, with an eviction notice dated 5 years ago. No lights, no sound. When I came back down, Ami was standing in the hallway barefoot, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. She said she could hear a woman humming. The tune was off-key, like a lullaby played backward. I wanted to tell her it was imagination, that we were tired. But when I stepped inside again, the humming followed me. Soft, wet, coming from inside the ceiling. By the 3rd night, I stopped pretending not to hear it. I set up my recording equipment, a directional mic, headphones, a small laptop balanced on a crate. The building was completely silent, except for that sound. Faint weeping that rose and fell like breathing. I refused to be in the same room. When I played it back, there were layers I hadn't heard in real time. Whispers beneath the crying, overlapping in patterns, syllables that sounded almost like words. Kaito. I froze, rewound. There it was again. My name, clear, deliberate, spoken through plaster. Arch, master. It spoke to me the night after. A voice so faint I thought it was in my head. Kaito, it said. My name again. Soft as breath, close to my ear, though I was alone. I turned every light on, searched every corner, tore a section of wallpaper from the wall. Behind it was nothing but concrete. Yet, when I leaned closer, there was warmth and a pulse. And I wouldn't come near it. She slept in the hallway, curled up with her sketchbook. I sat against the wall until dawn, listening to the slow, wet rhythm of breathing on the other side. It matched mine. The pattern began 3 nights after we moved in. At first, I thought it was coincidence. The sounds came precisely at 2:13 a.m. Every night, 3 long wails, then silence. Always the same rhythm, like something rehearsed. Ami stopped drawing altogether. She just sat near the wall, listening. I started labeling the recordings. Day 4, weeping. 2:13, day 5, weeping, same time. On the 6th night, the sound changed. There were words now too muffled to understand. I ran the audio through filters, slowing it down, stretching it. The voice was female, fragile, old, but buried under it was something else. Something that sounded like static or screaming. I watched Ami sleep with her headphones still on, the recorder blinking red beside her. The walls were quiet then, but as I lay down, the silence throbbed again, like a heartbeat under plaster. By the end of the week, the sounds had begun to evolve. Now they mimicked us. Soft phrases we'd whispered to each other days earlier. Ami said she heard herself laughing through the wall. When I played back the recordings, her voice was there. Faint, echoing words she'd never said. Let me in. I tried to rationalize it. The mind fills silence with what it fears most. Yet the frequencies were real, measurable, structured, intelligent. The building was responding. Ami wouldn't eat, wouldn't leave the room. Sometimes, when she wasn't speaking, her lips moved anyway, forming the same words. I went to the corner store that night for batteries. The clerk, a young man with dyed blonde hair, froze when I told him our address. He said, "No one lives there now." I laughed it off, said we just moved in. He didn't laugh back. His voice dropped to a whisper. They sealed that apartment after the summer floods. People died there. He didn't charge me for the batteries, just stared past me toward the rain outside and muttered, "If the walls start calling your name, don't answer." When I returned, Ami had drawn something on the tatami. A circle of faces, all without eyes. That same night, Ami began whispering back to the walls. At first it was soft, answers to unheard questions. Then she began repeating things. The voice said, "You shouldn't have come." I tried to stop her, but she flinched from my touch. Her eyes looked distant, like she was watching something far beyond me. I started hearing my own voice in the playback now. Distorted, slowed, stretched. But I never said those words. "We remember you." The audio clipped, like the mic couldn't handle what it was capturing. When I looked at the waveform, it pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. At 2:13 a.m., the pattern broke. No more whispers, only one scream. So raw and human it shook the walls. It came from every direction, vibrating through the floors, the ceiling, my own bones. Ami screamed too, clutching her ears. Then silence. The next morning, the paint near the window had cracked. Thin red stains bled through like veins spreading outward. The walls no longer whispered. They waited. Ami vanished on the 9th night. There was no sound, no struggle, just absence. I woke to find her futon empty, her sketchbook open on the tatami, a single page torn out. The drawing showed our apartment's walls covered in mouths, every one of them open in a silent scream. I searched every room, every floor. The caretaker, Mr. Nakahara, said no one had entered or left since midnight. The security cameras, he claimed, hadn't worked in years. But when I looked at him, I could tell he knew something. Something that made him avoid the walls as he spoke. That night, I listened to the recorder again. At exactly 2:13 a.m., there it was. Ami's voice, soft and pleading. "Kaito, help me," then faintly the same phrase. From inside the wall, I called the police the next morning. 2 officers came, polite but detached. They looked around, asked when Ami was last seen. When I said in this room, one of them frowned. He checked a file on his tablet and said, "Apartment 4. That unit's been vacant for over a decade." I showed them her things, the toothbrush, the clothes, the art supplies, but they just looked at me with pity. One officer touched the wall and jerked his hand back, muttering that it felt warm. They left soon after, promising to follow up when they were gone. I pressed my hand where the officer had touched. The wall was warm, and for the briefest second I felt a heartbeat. By nightfall, I couldn't stay still. Something was pulling me toward the sealed apartment next door. 404. The door was bolted with an old metal plate, edges rusted, paint flaking. I pried it loose with a screwdriver, the sound echoing down the hall like a scream. The smell hit first, rot and damp wood. Inside, the room was identical to ours, but everything was decades older. Tatami split open, mold crawling up the walls, and in the center of the floor, a small cassette recorder. Dust lay thick across it, but the red light still blinked. I pressed play. A voice filled the room, my voice, calling Ami's name. Geek, Dars, and Desters Sal, Orks Conscious Walkstrays Zast of Fight. I listened to the tape for hours. The voice on it was definitely mine. Same tone, same pauses. But the words were wrong. They described events that hadn't happened yet. Ami will go missing. The wall will speak. Don't answer it. The tape ended with a low groan, like someone exhaling from deep underground. When I stepped back into the hall, the door to 403 was open. I hadn't left it that way. From inside came a faint sound, a slow, rhythmic tapping, like nails brushing the inside of plaster. It spelled something. 3 beats, a pause, then 4. Morse code. K-I-E-O. I moved the recorder into the center of the room that night and left it running. When I woke at dawn, it had stopped. The digital clock beside it read 2:13 a.m., frozen. I pressed play, expecting the usual static, but this time, the recording began with the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate. They circled the mic once, twice. Then, a voice, Ami's, hoarse and whispering. It's not a place, it's a memory. And then underneath it all, another voice, lower, mine, repeating after her, perfectly synchronized. The air changed after the recording. It felt heavier, like the apartment had started breathing with me. I'd wake to the sound of footsteps pacing behind the walls, soft and wet, as though the plaster itself were trying to move. Sometimes I caught the scent of soap, the kind Ami used, or saw her shadow cross the window, though no one was outside. Mr. Nakahara came by that morning to collect rent. His face paled when he saw the torn wallpaper and the recorder still running. "You should leave," he said quietly. I asked if someone died here. He nodded once, not one. Many. Before he left, he whispered something I couldn't forget. They don't know they're dead. They think they're still renting. That night I dreamed of a family I had never met. A man, a woman, a child, sitting around a low table in a room that looked exactly like ours. They were silent at first, but then their faces twisted, mouths opening wide in perfect unison. They screamed until blood ran from their noses, until their throats split. I woke gasping, the same scream echoing in the pipes. When I checked the recorder, it had captured everything. 3 voices layered over my own breathing. When I slowed the playback, I heard a 4th. A voice whispering directly into the microphone. "You belong here now." By now, I couldn't tell when I was awake. The walls began to move when I wasn't looking. Faces pressed through them like clay, forming just long enough to breathe before sinking back. I caught glimpses of Ami's eyes within them, wide and pleading, but when I called her name, the lips only mouthed it back at me. The air was humid, stifling. My skin itched where condensation gathered on the plaster. I tore another sheet of wallpaper away and found something written underneath. Dozens of names carved into the concrete. The last one was Ami Fujimoto. I stopped checking the clock. The nights bled into each other. Sometimes the apartment felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. Sometimes the hall outside stretched endlessly. I found myself walking down corridors that shouldn't exist, rooms that folded back into themselves. In one of those rooms I saw Ami, or what looked like her. She stood facing the corner, her back rising and falling with slow breaths. When I touched her shoulder, she crumbled into dust that tasted like plaster. But the whisper that filled the room was hers. Stay. That night, I finally heard it clearly, the building's voice. It came not from the walls, but from everywhere, layered over the city's sounds, vibrating through my teeth. We remember, it said. We are what's left. The walls pulsed like veins. The ceiling dripped, and from the cracks above the door, a slow red fluid seeped down, sticky and warm. I thought I was screaming. But when I heard the recording later, it was laughter. In the reflection of the window, Ami stood behind me, smiling faintly, her mouth moving in perfect rhythm with mine. I stopped sleeping. The boundary between waking and dreaming disintegrated somewhere between the fourth and fifth replay of the same night. Each time I blinked, the furniture rearranged itself. The stains on the wall spread further. The air hummed with a low, constant tone, like the sound of an old television left on static. I began seeing faces in the plaster, faint at first, then fully formed, mouthing words in perfect synchronization. They weren't strangers. They were every tenant who had ever lived here, every lost echo bound within this building's lungs. I recognized one of them. My own. When I touched the wall, the skin of it shivered under my palm, warm, damp, and faintly pulsing. The wall sighed. The walls no longer whispered. They spoke. They told me things no building should know. Fragments of conversations, old arguments, dying breaths. The building's voice was a chorus, male and female, overlapping like static harmony. I covered my ears, but the sound came from inside my head. The mirrors, too, began to betray me. My reflection lagged behind my movements, its mouth moving long after mine had stopped. Sometimes it smiled when I didn't. I smashed the bathroom mirror in panic, only to find my reflection still intact behind the broken glass, still smiling. Time began to dissolve. I'd walk from one room into another, only to find myself back where I started. The clock hands never moved, frozen at 2:13. The city beyond the window no longer changed. The same train passed every minute, the same pedestrian crossed the same street forever. I tried the door. It opened onto the hallway, but the hall led back into the same apartment. Each door opened to another 403, identical, slightly decayed. I ran through dozens of them, breathing hard, until I entered one where the walls were covered in drawings, Ami's drawings, of me standing in the exact same pose. By now, I knew the building wasn't decaying, it was transforming. The walls no longer resisted, they yielded. When I pressed my hand to the surface, it sank slightly, leaving a faint indentation that filled slowly, like skin healing over. The ceiling throbbed faintly, veins forming beneath the paint. I could hear voices beneath the floorboards now, whispering names, laughing softly, crying. I followed one, Ami's, to the wall near the window. When I peeled the wallpaper away, her eye stared back from inside the plaster. It blinked. I stopped fighting it. The building was alive and I was part of it now. The hum beneath the floor synced with my heartbeat. The air seemed to enter my lungs through the walls themselves. I realized the building wasn't haunted. It was hungry. Every tenant it devoured became a part of its memory, a voice in its endless chorus. I found a message scratched into the plaster near the door, faint but legible. You were never alone. Beneath it, the wall shimmered slightly, reflecting my own image not in glass, but in flesh. I reached out, and the reflection reached back, not delayed, not mimicking, perfectly synchronized. When our fingertips met, the wall breathed. Mr. Nakahara returned unannounced at dawn. He stood in the hallway, trembling, clutching a rusted keychain in one hand and an old newspaper in the other. His voice was dry as paper when he spoke. "You shouldn't have gone into 404, he said. That room remembers too much." He handed me the newspaper. The headline was dated August 16th, 1983. "Family of 3 found dead in apartment complex fire." I skimmed the article and froze. The photo, grainy and faded, showed a man who looked almost exactly like me. Same eyes. Same hollow stare. "That family lived in your unit," Nakahara said. "They never left. None of them do." He turned to leave, but I stopped him. "What happened to the bodies?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just said, "Some walls are thicker than others." I couldn't stop thinking about the photo. I searched the internet, archives, anything. Every image of that 1983 fire showed faces blurred, but the resemblance to me was undeniable. I found an address, an old police report stored in a database. When I opened it, the listed victim names made my blood run cold. Kaito Ishida, Amai Fujimoto, and daughter, unknown. The file was dated July 2025. 2 months from now. That night, I dreamed of the fire. The smoke pouring from the walls like breath, the sound of cracking wood that echoed like laughter, and somewhere beneath it all, the faint rhythm of a heartbeat, steady and patient, waiting for me to return. I went back to Nakahara's office the next morning, desperate for answers. He was gone. The caretaker's room was empty, drawers open, dust undisturbed, as though no one had lived there for years. On the desk lay a single cassette tape labeled 403. When I played it, I heard the same scream from the first week, the one that came every night at 2:13. Then Nakahara's voice, weak and shaking, it feeds on what's left behind, on what's forgotten. The tape ended abruptly, replaced by the faint sound of my own breathing, and then underneath it, Ami's voice again whispering, "You've always lived here." I went back to the apartment, recorder in hand. The sound started before I pressed play. Faint, rhythmic thuds beneath the tatami. I lifted one mat and found the floorboards dark with rot. When I pried them open, the smell hit first, then the sight. Bones. Dozens of them, layered like sediment. Some belonged to children, some to adults, and one small skull still had hair attached. Long, black, unmistakably The walls around me began to vibrate, whispering fragments of 100 voices, all calling my name. Kaito, Kaito, Kaito. The room pulsed, breathing, alive with memory. The building began to collapse that night, but not in the way buildings should. It didn't crumble. It sank. The walls curved inward, the floor softening like muscle underfoot. I could hear the voices merging into a single enormous sound, not screaming now, but singing. The melody was endless, mournful, and somehow familiar. I realized the building was feeding, drawing the air from my lungs, the sound from my throat. I tried to run, but every door led back to the same room. The wallpaper rippled, forming words that glowed faintly in the amber light. "We are you!" And as the floor buckled beneath me, the wall sighed one last time, the sound of a memory closing its eyes. I woke to silence. For the first time in weeks, the building had stopped breathing. The air was still, weightless. The faint hum that had lived inside the walls was gone. Only the soft electric buzz of the bulb above remained, constant, familiar. I thought I'd survived. The floor was solid beneath my feet, the wallpaper smooth again. The red stains had faded into faint shadows. But when I stepped toward the door, something strange happened. The air shimmered like heat on asphalt, and the outline of my reflection flickered across the wall beside me. It looked tired, calm, at peace. When I blinked, it was gone. The silence felt too complete, too final. I opened the door, expecting the hallway. But it wasn't there. Instead, A vast expanse of quiet light stretched out before me, like the air after a storm. I could see fragments of rooms suspended in the glow, furniture, windows, staircases floating weightless, unanchored. Amai stood among them, her hair drifting as if underwater. She didn't look afraid anymore. "It's over," she said softly. "The building's done remembering." I wanted to ask what that meant, but the words wouldn't form. I could only nod as the light brightened, erasing everything between us. When the light faded, I found myself back in the room. Everything was as it had been the day we arrived. The suitcases still unopened, the air filled with that faint metallic scent. The sound of the train outside was alive again, the hum of Tokyo returning like the beat of a heart. But Ami wasn't there, and when I looked in the mirror, I wasn't sure I was either. The reflection moved a fraction too late, its eyes calm, accepting. It smiled faintly, not out of madness, but release. I turned away before it could fade. The building was quiet when I left. No footsteps, no voices. Just the slow, rhythmic hum of the city waking up outside. As I walked down the hallway, every door I passed was sealed, freshly painted, numbers gleaming. The elevator worked for the first time. A low chime that sounded almost human. I stepped inside. The mirror inside the elevator was spotless, but as the doors began to close, faint outlines appeared behind me, dozens of them. Watching silently, their shapes dissolving into reflections of old wallpaper patterns, the elevator descended without sound. Weeks later, a young couple arrived to view apartment 403. The building had been renovated, its walls repainted, its corridors bright and warm again. The agent unlocked the door, smiling polite. "No one's lived here for a long time," she said. When the couple stepped inside, the light was beautiful. A soft amber sunset pouring across the tatami. The air was cool, clean still, and yet, faintly, from somewhere deep within the walls, came the sound of a breath. Not a scream, just breathing, waiting.